In the wild world of the UFC, victory speeches are pretty much a script. You thank your coaches, your family, maybe you call out your next opponent. It's predictable. But what happens when a top-ranked fighter gets that microphone and says something nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming? Okay, let's get into the fascinating paradox of Beneil Dariush.
So just picture this. The crowd is roaring, the adrenaline's pumping, and then Dariush grabs the mic. But instead of the usual trash talk or a call-out, he drops this. He starts talking about true freedom in Jesus Christ. Right there, in the middle of the Octagon, it was a message that just sliced through all the noise and left millions of people watching completely stunned.
So what happens after a moment like that? Well, the reaction was instant, and man, was it divided. Suddenly, this wasn't just about a fight anymore. This was a massive public declaration of faith in one of the most secular arenas you could possibly imagine.
And yeah, this chart here pretty much breaks down the fallout. Dariush himself actually groups the reactions into three camps. First, he got this incredible wave of support from the Christian community, what he calls the body of Christ, the worldwide church. Then, from some in the Muslim community, there was some pretty strong pushback, mostly on religious grounds. And from the rest of the world, according to him, it was mostly just silence, or this kind of disdain, like, let's just ignore this guy.
Okay, so to really get the guy who gave that speech, you gotta understand the fighter first. We need to peel back the layers and look at what makes him tick. What got him into that UFC cage to begin with?
For most of us, stepping into a cage to fight another person, that's like our worst nightmare, right? Well, for Beneil Dariush, it's the complete opposite. He says the actual act of fighting, the physical battle, that was never the hard part for him. And get this, he even has a name for it. First nature. Just think about that for a second. For him, fighting isn't a skill he learned. It's not just a job. It's instinct. It's like breathing. He says you can throw him into any situation and tell him to fight his way out, and he's totally at home.
And then there's this. This is just pure, unfiltered, elite competitor mindset. This quote gets right to the heart of that savage intensity you need to be one of the best in the world at this sport. That drive, that joy in just completely dominating an opponent is what fuels the warrior. But that warrior, the same guy who finds joy in breaking his opponents, had this absolutely life-altering experience. Something happened that introduced a totally different identity into his life, the servant. And this was the moment. 22 years old, the man whose first nature was to fight came to know the Lord. This is where the paradox we're talking about really begins.
So what could possibly cause such a massive shift? Well, in his own words, it wasn't some philosophy, it was an encounter with Jesus himself. He talks about seeing this perfection that was the total opposite of what he called his own brokenness. It was this idea of a perfect love that could get rid of fear that just flipped a switch for him.
So, how does love your neighbor work when your job is to, well, punch your neighbor in the face? He says he uses that very principle. He looks at the guy across the octagon and sees someone with the same dreams, who probably has a family just like him. He has to hold these two things in his head at the same time. This is a man I have to defeat, but he's also a person I'm called to love. It's wild.
And that brings us right to the heart of it all, the central conflict, savage or servant. How can a guy who loves to break opponents also follow a faith that's all about love and turning the other cheek?
And what's so incredible is that Dariush doesn't run from this. He owns both sides completely. He says it, plain and simple. If I have to be a savage, I'll be a savage. But then he'll turn right around and say, I understand what it means to turn the other cheek. For him, both of those statements are 100% true. So you have to ask, right? Is this a conflict for him? Does he feel like he's being torn in two different directions, or has he figured something out that the rest of us are missing?
And his answer, wow, it comes from the writings of the Apostle Paul. He basically adopted this framework. You become what the situation requires, whatever situation God puts you in. So for Dariush, that means sometimes it's time to be a servant, and sometimes, well, it's time to be a savage. The whole key, he says, is just knowing the difference.
Okay, so if he's both of these things, what's the end game? What's the ultimate point of it all? This is where those two seemingly opposite identities finally come together and merge into one single, powerful purpose.
For him, it's actually pretty simple. He sees his entire career as a platform. That UFC Octagon, that's his stage. He believes his purpose, given to him by the Lord, is to make disciples. The fighting is just what gets the microphone.
And at the end of the day, that's what solves the whole puzzle. He's not really fighting for money or fame or even a championship belt. He says he's fighting for an audience of one. He has this incredible faith that if he just puts God first, all the other stuff, the training, the fight, the outcome, it'll all work itself out. The fighter and the follower are one and the same.
And so it leaves us with this pretty big question. Beneil Dariush turned one of the most violent stages in the world into his pulpit. It's just a powerful reminder that purpose and conviction can show up in the absolute last places you'd ever expect. It makes you wonder, where else are we missing it?